commuter plane in Norway is heading for disaster.
Stop! Just stop!
Then you're starting to run out of options.
Why couldn't it stop, or why didn't it stop?
The horrific scene is caught on home video.
Watch your step, guys.
We could find bits and pieces of steel, but all the rest of it was gone.
Could a mysterious substance point to the cause?
I think we found our smoking gun.
It's 7:20 a.m. High above the jagged coast of Norway, the crew of Atlantic Airways 670 reaches the peak altitude for a short 15-minute flight.
There's 10,000.
Okay. We're all the way up. Time to get ready to go down again.
Norway has a lot of steep mountains, deep fjords, and if you are to travel by road or by sea, your journey might take hours or days, while a short hop with an aircraft of 15 to 20 minutes will cover big parts of the country.
This morning, an oil company has chartered the plane to shuttle a group of employees to work. The first workers boarded at Stavanger Sola Airport. Next up is a quick stop on the island of Stord to pick up a few more before flying on to their final destination at Molde on the mainland coast. For Tor Johannessen, it's just another morning commute.
I was going to be on a 5-2 rotation. That means I was going to work for 5 days and go home for weekends. For me, it was a totally normal day.
Helt vanlige dag.
The crew is flying a British Aerospace 146, a 4-engine commuter plane ideal for flying between remote Norwegian airfields.
The 146 is a very nice airplane, an easy airplane to fly, actually.
Sven-Erik Strandberg flew the 146 for Atlantic Airways.
It was actually meant for landing on short runways and even gravel runways.
The runway's going to be in sight soon. Why don't you see what the weather's doing?
For this first leg, 34-year-old Captain Niklas Jørhus is at the controls. He's been a commercial pilot for more than a decade.
Control, Atlantic 670.
Can you advise on current conditions?
The first officer, 38-year-old Jakob Ewald, joined Atlantic Airways just a few months ago.
Wind is 110 at 6 knots.
Visibility is over 10 kilometers. Wind 110 at 6.
Atlantic 670. Weather's good.
This was a early October morning. Just about clear skies and almost calm winds. So a very good day for flying.
The plane was normal. Nothing that would predict something was wrong. It was cold, that was the only thing. It was early in the morning, and that's why I kept my jacket on.
Stord Airport is perched on the edge of a rugged island with rocky cliffs bordering the runway on 3 sides.
It's located on top of a small, pretty steep terrain around.
There's very little margin for error. Overshoot the runway, and you could end up in the sea below.
You still planning on runway 15? Winds 110 at 6 knots?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's just a small tailwind. Let's take runway 33. That way we can do a straight in.
You got it.
Shortly before touchdown, the crew makes a last-minute change. They want to approach stored single runway from the southern end, known as runway 33, rather than circling around to land from the north end, known as runway 15.
Control Atlantic 670.
We'd like to do a visual into runway 33.
Affirmative 670. The runway is free. You are cleared for a visual approach.
Runway 33.
Since they were coming from the south, a straight-in landing towards the northwest would be the most convenient way to land.
The straight-in approach will put the airplane on the ground in less than 5 minutes.
What's our landing speed?
112 knots.
The crew now enters the busiest time in any flight.
Set speed for final.
They must simultaneously shed altitude and speed.
Speed set.
Flaps 20.
And prepare the plane for touchdown.
Flaps 20.
You're deploying the flaps, you're putting the gear down, the wheels, if you will.
Gear down.
Gear is down.
Flaps to full.
Flaps full.
Flight 670 is just 1 minute from the runway.
We're stable. We have landing speed.
The flying pilot will be looking outside at the visual references. He'll be checking the airspeed to make sure that it's on speed, not too high and definitely not too low. And when you're landing at an airport like Stord, which is fairly short, where stopping distance is an important factor, then you're extremely highly focused on the desired touchdown point.
Reducing thrust.
The plane touches down at 7:32 a.m.
And spoilers. No spoilers.
I noticed there was something abnormal.
Full brakes.
Are we slowing down?
It felt like when you're driving a car on ice and you're trying to brake, but they don't work.
We're not stopping.
We realized it wasn't braking, and it's moving really, really fast.
Speed!
If the airplane still does not seem to be decelerating, then you're starting to run out of options.
Flight 670 is running out of runway. Desperate to stop his plane, Captain Yerhus takes drastic measures.
Hang on!
He throws the plane into a sharp turn. First right, then left, hoping to skid to a stop.
These pilots were thinking extremely clearly, and they even tried to put the aircraft into a skid just to increase the friction between the wheels and the pavement.
Stop! Stop! Just stop! We're going over!
Your only thought is that you're going to die. This is the end.
Nå er det slutt.
ingenuity is everywhere. From the seemingly mundane,
The most elegant, wonderful invention. We all need one immediately.
to the spectacular,
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
we reveal the stories behind the everyday creations that have transformed the way we live.
It's the future.
Great Inventions, Wednesday nights at 9, new to National Geographic. National Geographic Wild presents brand new America's Funniest Videos.
The show that celebrates the four-legged, two-legged, gale, fin. We've got a little of everything.
From the really wild to the runaway wacky.
Hop on board for this.
America's Funniest Home Videos, Animal Edition, Wednesday nights at 8:30 on National Geographic Wild.
This November on National Geographic Network. Inspired by true events,
Conley, exit the building.
Daniel Day Kim stars as Agent Matthew Riker. Follow him as he hunts down the anthrax killer.
It's 100% lethal. We're running out of options.
Be inspired by the stories behind these great inventions that have shaped the way we live.
It's the most elegant, wonderful invention. It's the future.
Drain the Oceans returns.
Many people compare it to something out of a James Bond movie.
With new expeditions to uncover hidden treasures beneath the waves. Journey to the untamed wilderness of Africa. And witness its harsh extremes and majestic beauty. All new this November on National Geographic Network.
The fire brigade responded immediately.
At Stored Airport, firefighters race towards the end of the runway, where Flight 670 has disappeared over a cliff. Both pilots are alive, but fire is consuming the right side of their plane.
You all right? Yeah. Emergency checklist. I'll shut down. You order the evacuation. Here it comes out. I'll go tell him.
Procedures call for the crew to shut down the engines and order an evacuation. But the cockpit door is jammed.
The door is stuck. We gotta get out. We gotta get out now.
I had only one focus, and that was I had to get off the plane.
Yeah.
Passengers face a terrifying challenge. The front exits are blocked, and moving up the aisle to the rear exit doors is like climbing a cliff.
The passengers had to more or less climb uphill in order to reach that door, using the seats and the headrests to pull themselves up towards the exit door.
The pilots have their own serious problems. One of the plane's 4 engines is not switching off.
The door is stuck. I can't get engine 2 to shut down.
Behind the engine, obviously, it's very hot. On the front end of the engine, there's the jet intake, the air intake, which is sucking air into the engine for compression. So basically, you have a danger area all around the engine.
You're standing in the aisle, hearing the jet engines, and you're sure that you're going to die when you jump out behind the engines.
Less than a minute after what seemed like a normal touchdown, all 16 people on board are scrambling for their lives. The cockpit door still won't budge.
We have to get out of here.
The pilots are forced to escape through the side window.
Above the window is a rope that you can use, and you sit out with the back, lean back, hold the rope, and kind of winch yourself down.
At the back of the plane, Tor Johannesson has finally found a way out. He escapes just before the plane bursts into flames.
The interior burst into flames, and you couldn't see anything. The next moment, I'm outside the plane. I didn't think about whether I was relieved or happy. I was just full of adrenaline.
My wife. I need to call my wife.
A local resident records the terrifying scene as aviation fuel burns out of control. It takes fire crews nearly 2 hours to quench the flames.
They had to stand up by the runway and direct their foam and water way down into the ravine, barely reaching the aircraft.
4 people are dead. Both pilots have survived. Tor Johannesson has suffered some painful burns, but it could have been much worse.
I kept my jacket on, which saved my arms from being badly burned.
There were tragic fatalities, but the fact that they managed to evacuate so many from the aircraft is really, really a feat which has impressed a lot of people in the industry.
Sven-Erik Strandberg spoke to the captain just after the crash.
I tried to comfort him somehow there, but he didn't say much.
I couldn't stop. Why couldn't I stop?
Obviously in shock and trying to figure out what happened, I would say, you know.
Within hours, Norway's Accident Investigation Board, the AIBN, is at the scene.
Watch your step, guys.
We knew very little in the beginning. We heard that it has skidded off the runway and it was burning and it was fatalities there. And then we knew it was serious.
As they begin their work, there's only one thing investigators know for sure.
We knew that this aircraft didn't manage to stop. So we had to look into why couldn't it stop or why didn't it stop.
Answering that question won't be easy. There's much more to stopping an airplane than just hitting the brakes. Aerodynamic forces, atmospheric conditions, and a range of mechanical systems are all at play.
So the evidence they would find would need a deep technical analysis in order to draw conclusions from it, or at least meaningful conclusions.
Flight 670 has come to rest nose down. One side rolled against the steep slope.
We saw that this must have been a dramatic event.
Investigators quickly realize the wreckage will give them few leads. Much of the plane has been completely consumed by the post-crash fire.
It was almost nothing left. It was melted aluminum, and what we could find was some steel bolts and some steel shafts and bits and pieces of steel, but all the rest of it was gone.
Investigators face immediate pressure to find the cause of the crash. The BAE 146 is considered an ideal machine for Norway's challenging flying conditions. If there's a hidden flaw in the design of the aircraft, other lives could be at risk. The flight recorders are quickly recovered, but they've been exposed to intense heat and fire for too long to endure.
They were quite burned, they were sooted.
Ooh, a lot of heat damage to the exterior.
And they have changed color from the normal red to black grayish color, which indicates that they have been exposed to extreme heat.
Well, let's hope the insides are in better shape.
Investigators send them for analysis and hope for the best.
We took both of the recorders to the British Accident Investigation Board, which are experts on reading out the recorders.
For now, the runway itself is the best lead they have.
Just record everything you see. Never know what might be important.
We could see some marks at the runway that looked like being from the accident airplane. So that was very interesting.
The skid marks might provide important clues about why the plane failed to stop. But analyzing them won't be easy.
How many planes use this airport anyway?
On this airport, there's a lot of skid marks. So it's a tricky part to determine which skid mark was from which aircraft.
As they collect bits of debris from the runway, they notice a troubling detail about the surface.
Runway's damp.
It lacks a crucial safety feature.
And there are no grooves.
Most modern runways are lined with special grooves that carry away rainwater and help prevent pooling. It was raining at Stord earlier on the morning of the crash.
A wet runway will make the runway more slippery, and it will increase the aircraft stopping distance.
We're not stopping!
Did a dangerously wet runway prevent Flight 670 from stopping?
We're going over!
Before its fatal plunge down a rocky embankment.
In the wake of Pearl Harbor, Hitler launches an attack to hurt America on home soil. Sinking hundreds of ships off the East Coast, it's quickly dubbed Torpedo Alley. But how were so many lives lost? We follow a team of marine archaeologists on a mission to investigate this little-known story to find out what really happened. Boom down! Hitler's American Battleground, Thursday nights at 9. New to National Geographic.
There's nobody that has not been touched by this pandemic.
It's tough right now because, we're struggling.
We have serious demand issues. For the first time ever, we have to have each other's backs.
I see color. Here we go.
We're all in this together, and we have to make this work.
Well done, Spurs. This is all we got.
Brand new season. Wicked Tuna. Sunday nights at 9 on National Geographic.
At the U.S.'s busiest airports and borders, watching for a crime that's about to be committed, Homeland Security has allowed us behind-the-scenes access. When passengers have drugs, when they try to smuggle them, and when they get found, they'll get arrested by this U.S. team. They love it when a sting comes together. The brand new season of To Catch a Smuggler, Friday nights at 11 on National Geographic.
I just got a call from Florida tracking an anthrax attack. We need to find out when it arrived and who it was targeting.
We got 28 new cases.
Encourage everyone not to... What we're talking about is a ticking time bomb.
This is a perfect storm.
Any connection to 9/11?
Stores have been weaponized.
We got to evacuate!
Who are these twisted people?
Terrorists.
Find a connection.
People are dying.
Shut this down!
The Hot Zone, Anthrax, starts November 29th, new to National Geographic.
Air traffic controllers at Stord Airport can't explain why Atlantic Airways Flight 670 careened over a cliff.
The other flight had no problem.
An identical plane landed 75 minutes before the crash. Sven-Erik Strandberg was piloting that plane.
It was not that wet, it was just a little bit damp, so we didn't notice very much on landing at all. So it was uneventful.
The idea that a wet runway was to blame just doesn't seem to add up.
You describe how the landing looked to you?
But investigators get a new lead when they talk to some of the firefighters who saw Flight 670 land. Several report seeing a trail of mist streaming from the plane's wings after it touched down.
The witnesses stated that they saw wing vortexes from the aircraft. For us, this is one evidence that the lift spoilers were not working as intended.
When an airplane is in flight, the wings create trails of turbulent air known as wingtip vortices, but only while the wings are generating lift.
In the air, you can actually see this like corkscrews following up from the wings.
The 146 has 6 spoilers that should have deployed on touchdown to disrupt that lift and help the plane stick to the runway and stop.
As soon as you select the spoilers, you will feel the airplane sink down towards the runway and you can apply the brakes.
Did the spoilers on Flight 670 somehow fail to deploy? It may be a difficult question for the team to answer. All 6 of the plane's spoilers were destroyed by fire.
Is this all we got?
Digging into this wreckage, we saw that it was no switches, no wires, nothing that could be useful for us, but we knew that the actuators possibly could tell us something.
Investigators are in luck. The actuators that move the spoilers into place have survived.
Okay then, let's see what these can tell us.
They send them to the lab for X-ray examination.
The actuator is the one moving the spoilers up and down. The actuator is a sort of a jack, you see? So it pushes the spoilers up and it locks them.
X-rays of the actuators confirm the investigators' suspicions. The spoilers never deployed. With no spoilers, Flight 670 didn't have the usual amount of stopping power. It's a compelling clue. Investigators wonder if they've found the explanation for the crash.
With no spoilers, they would need 40% more runway.
As a safety feature, the British Aerospace 146 can stop without spoilers, but it takes a lot more runway.
When you know that you're going to land at a short airport, you need to calculate how much distance you will use to land.
How long is this runway anyway?
Perhaps the runway it stored was simply too short for the plane to stop without this critical equipment.
Stopping distance is 470 meters on a 1,200-meter runway.
But it's a dead end.
They had more than enough room to stop without spoilers.
The last part of the runway, for instance, the speed should have been so low, so spoilers or no spoilers shouldn't be that important. So we knew early on that it must be something else in addition to the spoilers.
But what? That is the mystery now.
Stop! Stop! Just stop!
What else went wrong during a routine landing that suddenly turned to disaster?
We're going over!
In their quest for answers about the fatal crash at Stord Airport, investigators have a vital witness, Captain Nicholas Yerhus.
We tried to get into the cabin, but the door would not open. Not too sure why. We gave it everything we had, but the door wasn't opening.
Cockpit of his burning plane, and his desperate efforts to open the cockpit door and help with the evacuation.
Order the evacuation. Yeah, here it comes out. I'll control it.
The door was a new type, which was reinforced for security measures. So opening it by kicking it and so forth would not be as easy as with an old type, basic type of door.
Hey, we have to get out of here.
Now I need you to think back further.
To understand the cause of the accident, investigators need to know what the captain was doing in the cockpit before he lost control of the plane.
What happened when you first touched down?
Okay, well, as soon as we touched down, I pulled the spoiler lever, but it didn't work.
The captain says he tried to activate the spoilers on touchdown.
And spoilers.
No spoilers.
Full brakes.
But they didn't engage. And that wasn't the crew's only problem. Their braking system seemed ineffective as well.
We were slowing down. And I think we could have stopped if we just... I needed a few more meters.
Okay. Thank you, Captain.
Talking to the crew, we got indications that the brake possibly was not working. So then we were interested in investigating the braking system more thoroughly.
We're not stopping!
If the brakes on Flight 670 failed, that would explain why the plane couldn't stop. There might be evidence to support that theory on the flight data recorder. But it's been almost entirely melted by the fire.
The flight data recorder was a rather old type with the tape. And the tape hasn't survived the heat. What we got was just 3 smaller fragments that was usable. That was a disappointment.
The investigation into the crash of Flight 670 is nearly at a standstill. There's almost no hard evidence.
We've got about 3 seconds of FDR data after touchdown. And we know they had a speed of 20 knots near the end of the runway. And that's about it.
Investigators need to know more about how well the brakes were working when Flight 670 touched down. They hope the skid marks will tell them. As they trace the marks along the runway, they notice something strange.
Anyone seen skid marks this color before?
Normal skid marks, they're like black lines along the runway, but this was more like a lightly colored brownish type of marks.
Equally strange, the skid marks were dotted with unusual pieces of debris.
It smelled like rubber, and it felt like rubber, but soft and sticky.
The debris appears to be from the tires, but investigators have no idea why the tires would have disintegrated so severely.
I've personally never seen such rubber grains on a runway before, so that was new to me.
Investigators pin their hopes on the cockpit voice recorder.
Okay, let's see what we've got.
Though the flight data recorder is beyond repair, technicians have managed to recover the recordings captured in the cockpit.
There's 10,000.
The manufacturer were able to repair the memory from the recorder, and the information were superb.
This could be their last chance to solve the puzzle.
The runway's going to be in sight soon. Why don't you see what the weather's doing?
We had everything from takeoff to the accident.
Control, Atlantic 670.
They hope the sounds will reveal why Flight 670 didn't slow down.
Visibility is over 10 kilometers.
Wind 110 at 6, Atlantic 670.
Fairly routine so far.
They don't hear any mistakes.
The communication between the pilots was very professional, down to the point and exactly how a pilot would expect it to be on a flight like this.
Wind's 110 at 6 knots?
Yep.
So it's just a small tailwind.
Let's take runway 33. That way we can do a straight in.
You got it.
Bit of a tailwind.
What's our landing speed?
112 knots.
Set speed for final.
Looks like they were aiming for the right speed, but that tailwind could have given them a little bit extra.
Having a tailwind in general will affect your landing distance. It will increase a little bit.
Strong winds behind a plane can push up landing speed, making it take longer to slow down. So pilots usually try to land into the wind. That's what Sven-Erik Strandberg did on the day of the crash.
I made a circle to land, came in from the north, landing towards the south in a little bit of a headwind there.
Investigators wonder if the tailwind eroded Flight 670's safety margin when it was already struggling to stop without spoilers.
Tailwind? Could it be that simple?
Coming up next.
This is the future.
Nat Geo Science, next on National Geographic. This November on National Geographic Network. Inspired by true events.
Calmly exit the building.
Daniel Day Kim stars as Agent Matthew Riker. Follow him as he hunts down the anthrax killer.
It's 100% lethal. We're running out of options.
Be inspired by the stories behind these great inventions that have shaped the way we live.
It's the most elegant, wonderful invention. It's the future.
Drain the Oceans returns.
Many people compare it to something out of a James Bond movie.
With new expeditions to uncover hidden treasures beneath the waves. Journey to the untamed wilderness of Africa. And witness its harsh extremes and majestic beauty. All new this November on National Geographic Network.
The impact of human ingenuity is everywhere. From the seemingly mundane
The most elegant, wonderful invention. We all need one immediately.
to the spectacular.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We reveal the stories behind the everyday creations that have transformed the way we live.
It's the future.
Great Inventions, Wednesday nights at 9. New to National Geographic.
Investigators review the history of the British Aerospace 146. They find 12 other incidents of the plane careening off the runway after touching down in a tailwind. It's a troubling record.
Okay, runway is damp. Tailwind is 6 knots. Let's give it a try.
To learn more, they recreate Flight 670's landing in a simulator.
The airport at Stord is a nice airport in good conditions. Could be a little bit hard sometimes. From the west there.
And we're reducing thrust.
They want to know if conditions that day made it too difficult to stop with no spoilers.
Don't put out the spoilers. Step on the brakes.
But the theory doesn't hold up.
Okay. Looks like we're back to square one.
Within acceptable limits, it was nothing wrong about landing with 5 knots tailwind.
Even without spoilers to help slow the plane, the tailwind was not enough to push it over the edge. The answers investigators need remain elusive. What sent Flight 670 plummeting off the end of the runway?
We're going over!
Digging through the remains of the burnt fuselage turns up an unexpected lead.
A kind of breakthrough came when we started to remove the wreckage.
One of the tires from Flight 670's main landing gear has survived the fire. It's a lucky break. Investigators immediately notice that the edges of the rubber tire have a peculiar texture, just like the rubber pieces they found on the runway.
More sticky rubber.
The inner left-hand main landing gear had a flat spot, which indicates that the tire had been skidding along the runway. We could see that it had been extremely hot, and this heat had transformed the tire.
The tire manufacturer provides an intriguing explanation for the strange discovery.
Reverted rubber hydroplaning.
The sticky pieces of rubber are the result of an unusual phenomenon that sometimes occurs when rubber tires heat up due to extreme friction.
Let's bag some of that.
If the rubber is skidding along a damp or wet runway, the friction can generate so much heat that it turns the water into a cushion of steam that lifts the tire up off the surface of the runway.
The small layer of steam from the rubber developed between the tires and the runway, and basically making it a lot more difficult to get the required retardation from the wheel brakes.
The extreme heat also breaks down the rubber and makes it sticky, just like the fragments found on the runway.
Looks like we got a match.
We had a kind of textbook example of it in front of us.
The phenomenon also explains the unusually pale skid marks investigators found on parts of the runway.
The reason for the skid marks being so pale is because that cushion of steam sort of steam clean the runway, takes all the dirt and everything out of the runway itself.
Something just doesn't seem to fit.
But there's still a mystery. Reverted rubber hydroplaning only occurs if the wheels lock. It's the only way to produce enough friction. The BAE 146 is equipped with anti-lock brakes.
And spoilers. No spoilers, full brakes.
They're not supposed to lock up and skid ever. And yet that's exactly what happened. Investigators need to know why. Investigators need a lead. They return to the sounds captured in the cockpit of Flight 670.
Okay, go ahead, please.
We didn't know what had happened mechanically in the aircraft. So then we had to look for other means.
We have landing speed. Reducing thrust.
And spoilers.
Hang on, play that again.
Many cockpit controls make distinctive sounds when
Spoilers.
Investigators compare the cockpit recording to a detailed library of sounds, hoping to piece together what was happening on board Flight 670.
There. That click is the spoiler lever.
The technique pays off. They're able to identify specific sounds, including the click of the spoiler lever.
No spoilers.
Full brakes.
Listening closely, they soon hear another sound. A sound that could finally explain why the plane couldn't stop.
We're not stopping.
Stop. Can you match that?
The chiming sound indicates the plane's emergency brake has been switched on.
Play it again.
We're not stopping.
Listen to those tires. First the chime of the emergency brake, then they start skidding.
It's a major breakthrough.
We got the chime that proved that he has turned on the emergency brake. And a short period after that, we could hear the wheels, the noise from the wheels on the CVR.
I think we found our smoking gun. Anti-skid and touchdown protection may not be available. Landing distance will be increased by 60%.
Investigators learned that the emergency braking system on the British Aerospace 146 doesn't have anti-skid protection.
That was the last piece in the puzzle that told us more about this braking situation.
We're stable. We have landing speed.
Reducing thrust.
Investigators finally understand why Flight 670 ended in tragedy.
They touched down here, but the runway is damp, and there's a tailwind giving them a bit of an extra push.
And spoilers.
The captain activates the spoilers, but they don't deploy. No spoilers.
Full brakes.
Here, he switches on the emergency brake.
We're not stopping.
And that's the final straw.
Which means basically that the wheels locked, as on a car with no anti-skid brakes.
The plane's fate is sealed.
We're going over!
Investigators now believe that even with the damp runway, no spoilers and a tailwind, the plane would have stopped in time if not for the emergency brake.
We're not stopping.
But the pilots had no way to predict the outcome. They had never trained for such an unlikely scenario.
If you have a failure at a critical time, like just after touchdown in a case like this, and the normal systems for deceleration do not work, then you automatically, almost by instinct, go on to the next level. You need to go to the emergency brakes.
Hang on!
You have to stop the aircraft, and that's what they tried to do. In this case, of course, the runway wasn't long enough.
In their final report, the AIBN calls for better training to help pilots stop safely in similar situations. They also call for longer safety areas around runways, especially at airports like Stord that are surrounded by steep terrain.
That's our goal, that every accident should bring these safety standards a little bit in the right direction.
Since the crash of Atlantic Airways Flight 670, important changes have been made to make landing at Stord safer. The runway is now longer, and grooves have been added to channel water off the surface in rainy weather.
It's 50 meters longer now than before the accident, so I think it happened even though we had an accident.
The main task is to improve safety, and the other is telling the story so others can learn from failures.
Every Monday to Friday at 11 p.m.